It's Wednesday morning and tomorrow is World Book Day. So we thought we would talk to someone who knows all about books, and I'm pretty sure there are some interesting reasons why people become authors, maybe having a gripping story inside them that they just have to tell, maybe a life-changing experience that they had to share, or maybe because a badger had dug up their sister's garden. Hang on a minute. Well, no, that is exactly what happened to accidental author Sue Medcalf from Taunton, who had a conversation about a badger under a shed and went on to create the Itchybald Scratchet series of books. And Sue is with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to meet you. And what a lovely story. So tell us about you're in your sister's kitchen.
No, I'm actually at home. And to be honest, I was a little bit down because I was taking care of my mother-in-law with dementia. I was backwards and forwards over there, and also dealing with my mother who was ill. So with her affair, she lives in Bedford, so I was travelling there. And to be honest with you, I thought, is this all my life has to offer? Because it was just a lot on.
Yeah.
And then my sister rang. And I thought, to begin with, I thought it might be my mother-in-law. So I answered the phone with a heavy heart, and it's my sister. And she said, "Oh, Sue," she said, "I've got badgers and they're living under the shed and digging the garden up." Now, she's renovating her home, so this was like the last straw. So I said, "Well, don't worry. I'll look on the internet and I'll see if we can find a way to make them leave." So, of course, I had a look on the internet, and then I found things like they could swim, and they like peanut butter sandwiches and bananas. And the more research I did, the more I quite liked them. So I went in the kitchen and went to put my coffee cup down. I thought, rather than get rid of them, I'll make up a story to make her smile. So I kind of looked around, thought, now what can I call this badger? And the name Itchybald Scratchet leapt into my head. So I went back and called her and said, he's called Itchybald Scratchet. He's got a friend called Mouse because he's an enormous mouse.
Nice.
And they're out to try and save their woodland home from being built on. So that was how the story started. And your sister said,
that's all well and good, but how do I get rid of them from the garden? I mean, you mentioned obviously domestically you had an awful lot on with your mum and your mother-in-law. What about the real life? What had you done before? Had you had any writing experience?
No, none at all. I've always kind of made up silly stories, if you like, but never actually done anything with them. I might have written a few lines and that was it. But now I had a purpose. So it was every morning I would sit and write an instalment, and then I'd ring my sister, and while we were having our coffee, I'd read it to her. So over the course of a few weeks, she got this little story. So, of course, she loved it, biased probably.
Yeah.
But then I started to share it between neighbours and friends, and everyone liked it, and people began to say what a lovely children's book it would make.
And how easy was it, the writing process? Because the very few and infrequent times when I have to write stuff, there is that awful point where you sit looking at nothing, thinking there are just no words. I kind of sort of nearly know what I want to say, but then you type down a sentence and go, "It's terrible," delete it all and start again. I mean, are you kind of good at the process?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I think sometimes even if you write something, even if it doesn't make an awful lot of sense at the time, if you just sit and write, I usually try and write every day. So I'm either doing a blog or something that I'm doing, or the next part of the story. So it's sort of developed as such now, so that because it's a continuing story, because I wanted children to read and care about wildlife and the environment, each book is a story unto itself, so it leads on to the next one. So really I'm just continuing a theme, if you like, a story.
But be honest, do you ever kind of, when you, like you say, sometimes it's just about writing something, when you then reread it, do you go, "Oh, that's awful"?
I do.
Yes, I do. Well, thank God, we're all human.
No, I do that.
It's brilliant that your sister was on board, and like you say, you talked to sort of friends and family, and they obviously were liking it. And how then do you get it to become a reality? Because I imagine getting a book actually to a publisher who goes, "Yeah, well, you know, this has got legs. We could do something with that."
Yes.
It's probably the hardest thing in the world.
It is. And to begin with, I don't think people really kind of took it seriously, and I certainly didn't. It's a surprise to me as much as anybody. But it was just a case of, well, we'll see if anybody likes it, you know, and that's what people normally do, isn't it? You know, they send off their manuscript with high hopes and just hope that someone's going to like it. And in my case, it was fortunate enough that there was a local publisher, so he said yes, he liked it and he took it on, and the first 3 books were published. Sadly after that he wasn't very well, and it sort of all began to sort of break apart, and we had to decide then whether we were going to continue with the series or what we were going to do with it. So then the best way for us, because publishers then, if a book's already been published, they don't want to know because it's already been published. So we've now gone the self-publishing route. So the subsequent books we've actually done ourselves. But even so, there's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes with the editing, the proofreading, and the layout and all that kind of thing.
All the grown-up stuff.
Yes,
but it's the fun writing bit that you want to be doing. But how did it feel when that first book was published and through the post came a copy? What?
Wonderful. I couldn't believe it. And if I inspire anybody to have a go, do write something down, whether it's poetry or what it is, it really, you become engrossed in it, and it gets you carried away and you forget everything else.
Oh,
so it's
how lovely. Well, look, it's really nice meeting you this morning. Don't go anywhere. We've got lots to talk to you about. This is Sue Medcalf, the accidental author from Taunton, who is with us ahead of World Book Day tomorrow on BBC Somerset. So we are talking this morning to Sue Medcalf, who is an accidental author. She is the brains behind the Itchybald Scratchet series of books, which is all about a badger and initially to do with his environment and his needing to protect the woodland. Protect his woodland home,
right,
obviously.
Yes.
So an environmental side of things, which is, is that important to you to do books that are, obviously badgers are real things,
yes.
Talking ones that walk on their hind legs, probably not so much, but is it important to sort of cover real life things when you're dealing with the children's audience?
It is, although it's a fictional story. The facts about animals, I've done quite a lot of research and they're correct. So it's throughout the series of books, you can pick up on different little things to talk about. Like, for example, Naomi, that's the Shire horse in book 2.
Yep.
Some children don't realise that they may have been used to carry knights in armour.
Oh, okay.
Because they were the only horse strong enough. And there's also an albino badger in this book as well, because I've tried to pick on things which maybe aren't quite so common.
Yes. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because the best learning that you do is when you don't realise you're learning.
It is, yes.
But books, certainly I certainly remember when I was little, there were books that I loved reading because they were fun books, and then there were dull books that I had to read for school. And it's really hard, isn't it? Because sometimes you can be put off something as wonderful as reading just because you've read the wrong book.
Yes, I think everybody has a favourite, subject. But for me, it became wildlife because, I say, these badgers under my sister's shed. So all the books encompass lots of wildlife. My characters travel. And they go in book 4 to Australia.
Oh, wow.
I won't tell you how they get there.
Plane? No.
No. The reason for that is because my brother-in-laws live in Australia and my son now. So, of course, they don't have badgers in Australia. So the grandchildren would ask, what's a badger?
Oh, how funny.
So that came up. But there's Australian animals, but they're not like the common ones. They're not like a kangaroo, for example. It's a frilled lizard called Either Or. Okay. Either he comes or he goes.
Yep.
But he guards an opal mine. So, of course, it brings in about mining and opals in Australia. That's just one of the things.
Oh, brilliant.
That's covered in the books. Yes. So.
Obviously, one of the most important things with stories is not just to read them, but also to tell them. And you, as many authors of children's books do, you do storytelling. You've been very fortunate to be able to tell stories in somewhere where, up as far as we know, no one else had ever done it before.
No, we did a book signing at for someone with Authors' Day, it was, and there were several authors there. And I got chatting to someone who actually deals with Southwest hospices, and they then subsequently asked, if I would go along and do a little presentation and a reading to the children there. Yeah. But because the children's capabilities may be slightly less than some other children, I decided it was better to take along things. I couldn't take them out to the woodland, so I'd take the woodland to them. So I would maybe take leaves. Yep. So they could scrunch with. And there were different things that they could ask and interact with. So I sort of sat on the floor, and although I read from the book, it was in sections with doing other things as well to include the children. But they all had
also, what a lovely way of bringing the story to life, in a tactile way. The children presumably putting their hands in a box of leaves. Yes. Is great, isn't it? It was lovely. And if more people, would go and sort of entertain them, I'm sure they would love to hear more stories. And when you do storytelling, and you've obviously it's World Book Day tomorrow, and you're going to be out in a school talking stories. Yes, I am. Do you still love the sense of wonder that you get from the children? And that's one of the things I think that keeps me going. If I can encourage these children to read and care about the environment, and also to write their own story. So when they're out on a walk,
if they could look for something, even if it's just a bird's footprint. And then when they go home on a rainy afternoon, they can write their story and they can draw their pictures with it. Or siblings could work together. One could draw and one could write. So all the time it's improving literacy and learning. So this is one of the reasons that drives me.
And I guess the lovely thing you get to do is say, right, who's got a question for me? What kind of questions do you get asked?
I've had all sorts of questions. There was one little boy in book 1, there's a well. And of course, bearing in mind, it was just written for my sister to make her laugh.
Yeah.
And my character falls down a well. And one little boy was asking me, what's a well? And until then, it hadn't occurred to me that maybe children wouldn't know what a well is. So it's that educational part.
I thought you were going to say he asked if you'd done a proper risk assessment, and the character that fell down the well was wearing high vis. There's a lovely thing in the papers yesterday, which is one of those things that is, my kids are like in their 20s now, but I do remember kind of getting to the stage thing, they're too old for this now. But parents have been urged to read into their children well into their teens. This is, as the National Literacy Fund has found, there has been a 6% fall in youngsters who enjoy reading in just the last 3 years. And it's kind of really sad, isn't it, that we think children grow out of stories. They probably don't, do they?
No, I mean, when you think about it, even adults, they will go to storytelling evenings.
Yeah. And
going back, a couple of 100 years, that was entertainment, wasn't it? You'd go to someone's house and someone may tell a story, or they'd sing, or read poetry or something, and I hope that we're sort of coming back to that now, like to this storytelling.
Well, anecdotes as well, when somebody's like riveting, whether you're in the pub with them or out for a meal with them, there's nothing like it, is there?
No.
Your books continue to go at a pace. What's the next one? When does the next one come out?
Hopefully before the summer. It hasn't got a title as yet.
Okay.
I've got 6 out at the moment, but I'm working still on the series. I still, as I say, do WI talks, or if anyone would like me to go to a school, then I'm happy to go and do workshops or a talk. And I've also got a talk at Clevedon Pier.
Oh, brilliant.
So it's the first paid one that I've been asked to do. It's their anniversary. They've been going 150 years, Clevedon Pier. So they've asked me if I'll go and do a talk.
Now you see, that's got a great history. There's a book in that, isn't there? The history of Clevedon Pier. Let's get that written down.
Yes, apparently Sir John Betjeman said it was the most beautiful pier in England.
Oh, well, there you go.
So,
we've got a forward. We've got it all planned.
We have.
Well, it's been really nice meeting you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Your favourite. We mentioned about sort of when we were growing up that there was that kind of thing where there was one book that you loved. Is there one book that you loved that kind of?
Yes, I used to read Enid Blyton. Always. I read all the Enid Blyton books. But wherever I went, I always had a book with me, and I'm still the same to this day.
And Enid Blyton,
I have
of course,
to read.
Both ends of the Enid Blyton spectrum, you've got sort of the Noddy on the one end, and you've got all of the Famous Five and the Secret Seven and all of that kind of stuff.
I grew up sort of with Noddy and then graduated to the Secret Seven and Mallory Towers, all that kind of thing. So,
well, enjoy the day, and let's hope there's adventure and lashings of ginger beer on offer. And it's been lovely meeting you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.